What's up, everyone? Today I'm talking about my early top 12 running backs for 2021. Coming right up. And what is up, everyone? Welcome to the Gridiron Fantasy Football Podcast for Tuesday, June 8th, 2021. And I'm Chip, I'm your host, and thank you so much for listening today. If you're a new listener, thank you so much for joining us as well. If you'd like to share a podcast, you can find us over on Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and Amazon Music. If you'd like to watch us, you can watch us over on YouTube at Gridiron Fantasy Football. So please do me a favor, hit subscribe, support the show so you don't miss any more episodes. And on today's episode, I'm going to talk about my early top 12 rankings for the running back position. But before I do that, let's go on to some of the news that took place on Monday. Now, we all know what happened over the weekend. We saw that Julio Jones was indeed finally traded to the Tennessee Titans from the Atlanta Falcons for a second-round pick. Now, we knew that a trade was going to be imminent because of the post-June 1st salary cap issue. So, with that being the case, the Titans went ahead and acquired him. And honestly, kind of looking at the trade itself based on fantasy value, I think that when it comes to, let's start off with the Tennessee Titans first. I do think that when it comes to the Tennessee Titans, I don't think this really changes A.J. Brown's value at all. I think that it stays the same. A.J. Brown continues to be the number one wide receiver. I see Julio Jones still as a wide receiver too. I think that's what he's in fantasy as well. I don't think that he's a guy that he's no longer a premier fantasy wide receiver, especially going to a team that has A.J. Brown. Now, we did see what happened last year when we saw Calvin Ridley finally come into his own. It was that transition. Julio Jones is no longer wide receiver one, so I think that him going to the Tennessee Titans really helps the offense in general. Now, the Tennessee Titans is a run-heavy offense, so I do think that there's going to be some limitations on Julio Jones. I think when you see what Corey Davis did last year, I think that it's going to be a comparable kind of just example of exactly what he's able to do. So, like, think about Corey Davis. Corey Davis, he had 20.5% of the target share last year to A.J. Brown's 23%. So I think that's what it stays. I think that A.J. Brown's value stays exactly the same. I think I like him a lot more now because he won't be getting premier coverage. You know, you have to understand, like Corey Davis, he's a talented wide receiver, but he's not like Julio Jones. So I think A.J. Brown finally gets more one-on-one, and he's fantastic after the catch. So I think that this is a great upside for A.J. Brown. Also increases the value of Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill has been a really good, reliable fantasy quarterback the last few years once he got the starting position over Marcus Mariota. And I think that continues. I think that because of how good he is, now adding Julio Jones, now they do lose Jonnu Smith, but I do think that Julio Jones makes up for that, obviously. So I think that this increases the value of Ryan Tannehill. And obviously, thinking about what goes on now to the Atlanta Falcons side of the ball, obviously, Calvin Ridley, he was a monster last year. Now he just could be more of a beast this year. I think that this continues to make him be a top 5 wide receiver. And I do think, I haven't done any mock drafts yet, so I don't know exactly where he falls right now after the trade. But I can see him being a value pick there. I think that, a lot of people, Calvin Ridley hasn't really, in my eyes, hasn't really gotten that name yet. I think that he's not looked at just like a Tyreek Hill or a Devontae Adams or Julio Jones in that name aspect. So I still think that he may be not as coveted in some of the leagues, but he's still going to be a guy who's going to be ranked and drafted high. But I do think that he's without injury, I think he is definitely for sure a top 5 wide receiver. Only bad side is he will see more of the tougher coverages. So that's the only thing. We saw some games last year in the fantasy standpoint, he got shut out. So now that he's the wide receiver 1 going into next season or going to this season, it could be tough. But I think that the target share is going to be there, and I think that that's definitely going to help with Julio Jones gone. Because I do think that even with Julio Jones gone, this helps Russell Gage as well because he'll get more, his value goes up a little bit in deeper leagues. He definitely gets more of the target share. So I think Russell Gage may be a guy that you can look at as a late value pick. Maybe some guy that you can be as your wide receiver 3 or maybe a flex play based on matchup. And now who it hurts, this obviously hurts Matt Ryan. This is not good for Matt Ryan. Yes, they got Kyle Pitts in the draft. They did add Mike Davis to the backfield. But losing Julio Jones is really going to hurt Matt Ryan in that offense. I did have him ranked in my top 12 when if you watched the video I did a couple weeks ago on my top 12 quarterbacks for 2021. And now, based on this, I have him ranked outside my top 12. Now I got to kind of adjust my rankings based on that. But it hurts Matt Ryan. I think that it would have been fun to watch Julio Jones with Calvin Ridley, Kyle Pitts, Hayden Hurst, Mike Davis, Russell Gage. But, we had a feeling this was going to happen. We saw this happen live on the air when Julio Jones was talking to Shannon Sharp that he didn't feel like he was going to be back in Atlanta. So overall, I think this is good for both both teams. Now the Falcons do get a second round pick. Obviously, you'd rather have a talented player that we know of their talent in a player like Julio Jones than a draft pick, but at least it was some compensation, and at least the Titans didn't have to get a first round pick. So overall, it's gonna be fun to watch the Tennessee Titans next year. I'm gonna love their offense. I'm gonna love to see what they do with Julio Jones and how they can take that step forward, trying to beat someone like the Ravens or the Chiefs in the playoffs or whatnot. So that's it on that. And then now moving on to Aaron Rodgers news. Mandatory minicamp happens this week for the Green Bay Packers. It is likely that Aaron Rodgers will not show up. It also looks like a lot of the receivers, including Devontae Adams, will not show up for mandatory camp. So obviously this is not just an Aaron Rodgers problem. It's going to continue to trickle down to the wide receivers. So don't know exactly what that's going to be like with Aaron Rodgers, but he will start getting fined. So once he starts getting fined, then who knows? He is going to miss if he doesn't play the whole season. He's going to miss out on $35 million this year. I don't know about you, but I don't want to lose out on $35 million. I mean, I've never seen that type of money before, but I can't imagine that that's something that he will definitely do. So something to monitor in the coming weeks, and especially this week. Moving on to Tampa Bay. The Tampa Bay Bucks have re-signed GM Jason Light to a contract extension. That I do think that's appropriate. He won the Super Bowl this year. He has built a good team the last few years. So I think that the Bucks are in good hands with Jason Light. I think that obviously the talent that they have, they brought in with Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski. I do think obviously that obviously helps. They won the Super Bowl, but he built a team that was one player away. So the Bucks had a good nucleus of players that were drafted, and then Jameis Winston was too much of a turnover machine. So they brought in Tom Brady, and you went from a team that was having over 30-something turnovers from their quarterback to having relatively nothing to going on a run and winning the Super Bowl. I mean, it makes a difference. One player can make a difference, and at this point, that's what happened with the Bucks. They got Tom Brady, they got Rob Gronkowski, they got the turnovers, all that cleaned up. Their defense stepped up, their offense looked better, and they won the Super Bowl. And on top of that, Tampa Bay Bucks revised the contract for Bruce Arians. No extended years. All we did was get a pay raise. So good to see someone like him get a pay raise. And then going on to the Baltimore Ravens, they re-signed restricted free agent Gus Edwards to a 2-year deal worth $10 million. Now, this was kind of news that I was kind of surprised about, because I think everyone's thinking about J.K. Dobbins being the guy that's going to be taking that next step on being that one of those fancy sleepers. But it looks like they still like Gus Edwards to be that 1A, 1B type of running back. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how Gus Edwards is used next year. So that is all the news that took place on the weekend and on Monday. So now let's go into my top 12 running backs for 2012 as of today, June 8th. So let's start off with my running back 12. So I got Joe Mixon here. Joe Mixon, he last year finished as a running back 49. He had 252.8 fantasy points. Now, he only played 6 games. He was injured all throughout the season. So obviously that finish, it was based on where he finished last year, and that's based on injury. So the thing is, he had 428 yards, he had 3 touchdowns, and then on the PPR standpoint, he had 21 receptions for 26 targets for 138 yards and a touchdown. So, he was a guy that was not rushed back. He did not play the rest of the season. So Joe Mixon is a guy that's usually a 1,000-yard back. He's a guy that I think has all the talent in the world. He's just not utilized properly. And last year with Burrows coming in and that offense kind of looking a lot different, it still didn't show because of injuries. But I do think that the pros about this year with Joe Mixon, he has no time share with Giovanni Bernard. He went to Tampa, and so I think that this is full-on Joe Mixon's backfield. And the offensive coordinator for the Bengals did say that Mixon will be a third down back. So We saw a lot last year and years prior that on third downs or, short yardage, or not short yardage, but 2 minute drills, all that stuff. They brought in Giovanni Bernard, and I think that this is Joe Mixon's backfield now to show what he can do on a full-time basis. So I'm excited to see what happens with Joe Mixon. The problem is with the cons of the Bengals right now is that how many times will they be from behind? How many times will they be in a negative game script? How will Joe Mixon be utilizing that? Will he be a guy that's going to get those short dump-off passes to get some yardage? We don't know. I know Joe Mixon is talented enough to do that, but are the Bengals going to utilize him that way? It sounds like they are, but that's all coach speak right now based on it being in June right now and no mini camps or no training camps going on right now. So all that stuff's going to be starting up fairly soon. So hopefully we see more news on that. Now going on to my running back 11, I got Cam Akers here. Last year he finished as a running back 45. He had 101.8 fantasy points. He did play 13 games, but he was in a timeshare with Darrell Henderson. You got Malcolm Brown there. But you saw what happened by the end of the season. Cam Akers ended up being the actual lead back when they were playing, end of the season through the playoffs. He did have 625 yards on the ground with 2 touchdowns. He had 11 receptions for 14 targets for 123 yards and a touchdown. Now, what I like about this is, Sean McVay, it's all about what Sean McVay thinks of this player. They drafted him out of Florida State to hopefully be this guy, right? So Sean McVay sees him as a third down back, and there are no limitations for him in his offense. So based on that, it looks like Cam Akers should be the guy that can have top 5 value next year if they look at him the way, the Sean McVay is speaking about him. So hopefully that happens. The only problem about this is that going back to the timeshare, they still got Darrell Henderson there. He's not a bad running back. So will this be a problem with the hot hand, quote unquote hot hand, with if Darrell Henderson is just running well and the offense is moving, are they going to take, are they really going to take Henderson out of the game to put in Cam Akers? We don't know that yet, but all the early news is that Cam Akers is going to be used very well and utilized very well this year. So hopefully that happens where you can get a good value on Cam Akers. Now moving on to number 10, I got Aaron Jones here. He did finish last year as a running back 5. He was a pretty decent value this past season. He had 258.9 PPR points. He played only 14 games. He had over 1,100 yards with 9 touchdowns. He added 47 receptions on 63 targets for 355 yards and 2 touchdowns. He did average 18.5 PPR points per game. Now, what's good about this is that he's in a top 10 rushing offense. They also re-signed him, so obviously they look at him as their lead guy. You don't give a guy big money like that if he's not going to be utilized, so they re-signed him. And then Jamal Williams, he leaves for Detroit. So all these things are good, right? So we see things, going in Aaron Jones' direction of being the lead back and being the sole back. However, even though Jamal Williams left, A.J. Dillon now is the guy that will take that role. Now, A.J. Dillon's a different back than Jamal Williams. A.J. Dillon is more of he's a bigger back. Now, will they bring him in for goal line work or short yardage work? That we don't know that yet. But the thing is, A.J. Dillon will take some stuff away from Aaron Rodgers when it comes to fantasy, value in his floor and the ceiling. But the thing also, it matters based on what Aaron Rodgers does, though. The Green Bay Packers offense is ran through Aaron Rodgers. We don't know if he's going to play. So hypothetically, if Aaron Rodgers does not play, how does that affect the whole offense as a whole? How does that affect how efficient they are, how well the offense moves? Who knows? But I do think that it's yet to be determined. I think everything, Devontae Adams' value, it hinders on the fact of what happens with Aaron Rodgers, same with Aaron Jones, his whole offensive, if Jordan Love is the quarterback, and based on things that people have seen with Jordan Love, he does not look like he's ready to play. Even the front office says that Jordan Love is not ready to play. So makes me concerned for Aaron Jones this year if we don't know who the quarterback is going forward. So that's the only thing I'm worried about, but I have him at 10. At number 9, I got Nick Chubb. Last year, he finished as the RB 11. Now, he only played 12 games. He did get 207.7 PPR points. He had just over 1,000 yards rushing with 12 touchdowns. He did give you 16 receptions and 18 targets and 150 yards with no touchdowns. The problem with this is that we've seen Kareem Hunt finish as the 10th running back last year in PPR formats. Now, it's because, obviously, Nick Chubb missed a lot of games based on his MCL injury that he had. So obviously that changes Kareem Hunt's ranking. But the problem is they had 2 top 10 running backs last year. that's the thing. Well, the thing is good about it is that they're a very run heavy offense, which is good for Nick Chubb and that offense. But they did rank third last year in the rushing offense. They do have a favorable strength of schedule, but the only thing about Nick Chubb is that Kareem Hunt's still there. Kareem Hunt is a very talented running back. We know who Kareem Hunt is. He's a guy that could be the lead back if Nick Chubb was even on the team. But the thing is, they utilize him in a very sparingly way. They bring him in on third down. They can. Nick Chubb is a guy that I think he's a safe running back to have, but he's not a guy that's going to give you 6 touchdowns or 5 touchdowns in a game, like potentially because of the timeshare he has with Kareem Hunt. But it also is, Nick Chubb is not a PPR running back. He's not a guy that's going to give you a lot of receptions. That is Kareem Hunt's role. So with Nick Chubb, that's the cap that you have on him, is that he just isn't a guy. He's almost like Derrick Henry in a sense. He does not have the upside as a PPR running back, even though he can catch the ball. He's just not naturally like Kareem Hunt is. So that's why I think Nick Chubb just has that cap there. Now going to my running back 8, I got Ezekiel Elliot here. Last year he finished as an RB9. He ended the season with 223.7 PPR points. He only played 15 games. He had just under 1,000 yards with 979 yards with 6 touchdowns. He did give you another 52 receptions on 71 targets with 338 yards and 2 touchdowns. So Zeke last year had a down season. What I do like about him, though, that he has no timeshare. He is a PPR running back. He did lead the league in carries inside the 5 with 26, but he only converted 5 of those touchdowns. So the problem is he just wasn't very efficient on the goal line, but he is getting those carries. The problem is with this is I feel like the Cowboys are starting to become more of a pass-heavy offense. When you have Cooper, Gallup, you got CeeDee Lamb. I know that Zeke will be a part of that passing game, but it seems like they're trying to find ways to stretch the field. And hopefully this is a season that Zeke is able to turn around. I do think that with Zeke Elliott, he was not good when Dak Prescott was out with his injury. We saw his numbers dramatically change. He just wasn't efficient. He wasn't good. The whole offense in general wasn't good. And the second part of this is that he has the hardest strength of schedule for a running back this season. So with that being the case, I think Zeke's a good value. However, we just don't know exactly, as of right now, how efficient he will be and how much upside he'll have based on having such a tough schedule. So I still think he's a guy that you can grab for value. But right now, I have that running back number 8. Now moving on to my running back 7, I got Jonathan Taylor here. Last year he finished as an RB6. He had 252.8 PPR points. He played 15 games. He had 1,169 yards on the ground with 11 touchdowns. He had 35 receptions on 39 targets and almost 300 yards with a touchdown. So we saw what Jonathan Taylor was supposed to do. We saw the talent in college. We saw what they drafted him for. He didn't really see it much throughout the season. There was a glimpse of it, but then you saw it really come on at the end of the season, where I feel like he got most of his fantasy points and why he went up in the rankings. But, the thing is, you saw what he can do with full-time work. He was a beast. He was top 5 in carries inside the 5-yard line. So that's always good when you have somebody who's gained the goal line, the goal line work as well. However, the problem is with him is that you have Nyheim Hines there and you have Marlon Mack. So how is that going to affect Jonathan Taylor's upside? And with Carson Wentz being there, like the offense can be a little different this year than we saw last year. We saw, Phillip Rivers. He's a guy that likes dumping the ball off. You saw it in LA with Austin Ekeler with Phillip Rivers, so he likes kind of dumping those balls off to his running backs. How is Carson Wentz can be like that, this year? So I like Jonathan Taylor. I have him in Dynasty. I'm really excited about having him in Dynasty, but he's a guy that I think could have a monster season. But I'm hoping the Colts allow him to be the running back without and only using Nyheim Hines and Marlon Mack sparingly. And then moving on to number 6, I got Derrick Henry here. He finished last year as an RB3. He had 333.1 PPR points. He did play all 16 games. He was the rushing leader last year at 2,027 yards on 17 touchdowns. Now this is, he had 19 receptions on 31 targets for 114 yards and 0 touchdowns. He gave you 20.8 PPR points per game. Now we do know that Derrick Henry, like I said earlier in the podcast with the news with Julio Jones, the offense runs through Derrick Henry. They're a run-heavy offense. This guy is just a beast. If he gets going, it's hard to stop him. With Derrick Henry, you're guaranteed to get double-digit touchdowns. He's a guy that when he got drafted out of Alabama in the first couple of years, he just was, we didn't really see much of it. And all of a sudden, it clicked. I think it was that one game, I think it was in 2018, they played the Jags one night, and he just was railing everybody. And since that point, he has been a fantasy stud for the last few seasons. So Derrick Henry, I think, he's a safe pick. He's a guy that unfortunately does have some limitations because he doesn't catch a lot of balls out of the backfield. But he is somebody that I like at this part. He's not a guy that you're going to pay super high for, but he's a guy that's going to be pretty steady for you, which is good. The only downside about this, like I said earlier, he's not a PPR running back. So he's not a guy that is going to get you a lot of catches, because the problem is that the Tennessee Titans do find themselves in negative game scripts. They're going to take him off the field because he's not a guy that can do that. So that's the only problem for me, is that if the Titans are ahead, which they're going to be a playoff team, I believe. So if they're going to play a lot of games with a positive game script, this helps Derrick Henry and anyone who owns Derrick Henry. But the problem is, if they're behind, how much that can affect him fantasy-wise. And also, too, Julio Jones. How does Julio Jones factor into all this, too? Because we know that A.J. Brown was there. We had Derrick Henry. We had Jonnu Smith. But now you find someone who's dynamic like Julio Jones. Do they tend to go more passing because they have two stud wide receivers? Is yet to be determined. So it's going to be fun to watch. But Derrick Henry, for me, he is, all the guys that are in my top 5 are a lot of PPR running backs. So that's why I have him at 6, because he's like the best running back after all the PPR guys. And this might be controversial, but my number 5 guy, I have Austin Ekeler. I love Austin Ekeler. He finished last year as an RB26. He only had 165 PPR points in 10 games. He had a really bad hamstring injury. He did give you 530 yards on the ground with 1 touchdown. He gave you 54 receptions on 65 targets, or 403 yards and 2 touchdowns. What I do like about Austin Ekeler, he's an excellent wide receiver out of the backfield. He's going to be the lead back. I think that we see potential in Austin Ekeler when he's out there. The only problem with Austin Ekeler is, will he stay healthy for a whole season? And with that being the case, if he is, will he be able to give you enough on the ground? Because we know that Austin Ekeler is an efficient running back when he gets the ball, because he's a good wide receiver. But I would like to see Austin Ekeler, if he's able to get a majority of the goal line work, he's able to get majority of the carries just overall, I think Austin Ekeler is going to be a monster last year. I have him in my top 5. I think that's his ceiling. I think that he's a guy that definitely could be a monster if he gets the opportunity to catch the ball in the backfield like he has been. And then now they add the rushing attack for him as well. I think Austin Ekeler is going to be a monster next season. And then going on to number 4, I have Alvin Kamara. So last year, Alvin Kamara ended the season as an RB1. He had 377.8 PPR points. He played 15 games. He missed 1 game because of COVID. He had 932 yards on the ground on 187 attempts. He had 16 touchdowns on the ground. PPR wise, he had 83 receptions and 107. He had 107 targets. He gave you 756 yards receiving with 5 touchdowns. He averaged 25.2 PPR points per game. Now, think about Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara is my favorite running back in the league. I owned him so far in every season that he's been, available since he was a rookie. He is a guy that I will watch, regardless of who's playing. I'm going to watch Alvin Kamara. I just love watching him play. He's so fluent. He just skates around the field. It's crazy on how easy he makes things look. The good thing about it is that he doesn't need a lot of touches to be efficient. We've seen this time and time again through the years that he's been in the league, that he is a very good fantasy running back with limited touches. Now, he was healthy last season, definitely bounced back from 2019, so good for him. He's been a monster. He's been averaging over 80 catches per season so far. He's in a good offense. He's in a top 6 rushing offense, which is good for him. He was top 5 in carries inside the 5. He had 11 touchdowns, in the red zone inside the 5, so that's good for him. But the downside with Alvin Kamara, and this is why I'm probably going to be off of Alvin Kamara this year, is there's no Drew Brees. Drew Brees and Alvin Kamara, they clicked well. He always had routes for him that would get Drew Brees out of trouble. He was always that dump off guy. Very, very good on that. And we just don't know how good the offense is going to be. We know they have talent on the offense, but how good would they be without Drew Brees? How efficient would they be? And honestly, it makes me nervous with Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston. We don't know who the quarterback's going to be. And the problem is that with Alvin Kamara, he lost a lot of goal line touchdowns to Taysom Hill. That's the problem. You got a guy who really doesn't dump the ball off to the running back, and you got a guy who is a running quarterback who will take carries and touchdowns away from Alvin Kamara. Now, if Jameis Winston is the quarterback and wins this job outright from Taysom Hill, I think that really makes it arguably the situation where I think that will give me a reason to have Alvin Kamara again. But the problem is that they always have to have Taysom Hill on the field. He's always this gadget guy. So even with Jameis Winston, if he was a starting quarterback hypothetically, Alvin Kamara will have some things taken away from him because of Taysom Hill. So it's one of those things that makes me nervous for Alvin Kamara. I love watching him play, but I just don't know if we see him as the RB1 again. There will have to be some dramatic changes to that offense where Taysom Hill really focuses on being a quarterback and learn how to dump the ball off and not doing a one read to Michael Thomas and then running the ball. Hopefully, he sees what Drew Brees does with Alvin Kamara and they're able to make that work. But it makes me nervous going forward. At number 3, I got Saquon Barkley. Last year, obviously, he finished as the RB121. He only played 2 games. He only had 15.4 fantasy points last year. Really no stats. He had 34 yards on the ground, no touchdowns. He gave you 6 receptions for 60 yards and no touchdowns. I mean, he tore his leg up, so he's not, obviously that's no fault to him. The good news is he's still Saquon Barkley. He's a monster. He has no timeshare in that backfield. He's a PPR machine. He's in an improved offense. I do think that when you add Kenny Golladay, you add some draft picks, Saquon Barkley, I think they give you exactly what Saquon Barkley has always given you. I don't think that in addition to Kenny Golladay really hurts Saquon Barkley much, but I do think that this offense potentially could be pretty decent fantasy-wise. I don't see the Giants being a team that are going to be leading a lot of games, where they're going to be winning a lot of games. Now, they could surprise us, but I see them being a lot of negative game scripts, which is good for Saquon Barkley because he's a focal point of the offense. I do think that this helps him from a fantasy standpoint, so I still think that he's a safe running back to have. But like I said, as long as he stays healthy, I think Saquon Barkley is a good pick there. And at number 2, I got Christian McCaffrey. Last year he was hurt a lot. He only played 3 games. He finished as the running back 54. He gave you, he did have 5 touchdowns last year. He gave you 17 receptions and another touchdown in the air. Obviously he was injured. A lot of ailments, a lot of nicks and bruises here and there. High ankle sprain. Then he had a quad contusion. They had the shoulder injury. So there's a lot of nagging injuries all season. The good thing about Christian McCaffrey, he's the focal point of that offense. With Sam Darnold now being the quarterback, how's that changed? But I think that when you have such a talented player like Christian McCaffrey, you're going to find a way to give him the ball. So I think that because he's the focal part of the offense, he's their best playmaker. I don't think Christian McCaffrey has any issues with being a top running back this year. Now, the only thing about this is that he is a small running back. Have we seen the best of Christian McCaffrey? I'm not saying we have. I'm just saying that have all the injuries caught up with him, because we saw how much he was utilized when he first came into the league. Then last year, he just could not get over injuries. I'm just kind of concerned because he's a smaller back, do they need to bring somebody else in there? Like, say, hypothetically, they kept Mike Davis, whoever their backup running back is. Like, I would be interesting to see if they were able to utilize Mike Davis and Christian McCaffrey in a way where it was almost like we've seen Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram, or Alvin Kamara or Latavius Murray. I think that you can still be effective fantasy-wise. You can still be a top 5 fantasy running back, but not have so many touches, not have such a beating on you. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how Christian McCaffrey does this year, but I'm just nervous about him because I don't know if we're going to see the same effectiveness from him if he continues with such a huge load of the offense. But I like him. He's still a beast. Hopefully he's a monster next season. And at number 1, I got Dalvin Cook. So Dalvin Cook finished last year as the RB2. He had 337.4 PPR points. He played only 14 games because he missed some games with a groin injury. He had over 1,157 yards. He has 16 touchdowns. He gave you 44 receptions on 55 targets for another 361 yards receiving and a touchdown. He averaged 24.1 points per game. Now, what's nice about Dalvin Cook, the reason why I have number 1, obviously great talent. There's no timeshare. He is the guy in the backfield. He's in the top 5 rushing offense. Dude is so nice to watch, so fun to watch, and I think that The offense doesn't necessarily run through Dalvin Cook, but that offense is a lot better when he's involved as much as possible. It would be nice to see him get a little more of the targets. I think that he's definitely a good wide receiver out of the backfield, but based on that, I mean, he's still a top 5 running back. The only thing with me is that there's always something about him with injuries. He's always had, he had ACL a couple years ago. He had, his groin last season. The only thing about Dalvin Cook, if you are a Dalvin Cook owner, you just have to have Alexander Mattison on your roster. You have to leave a bench spot for him, keep him the whole entire season. I did that last year, and it helped because I didn't have to spend any fab on him. So might as well spend the money now in your draft to get Alexander Mattison, just to have him on your bench so you don't lose out on him in free agency when the season does happen, if he does get hurt. But I think that if Dalvin Cook plays all 16 games, he's as efficient as he usually is, and that offense is, runs, the way it does, I do think that Dalvin Cook has a chance to be the top running back this season. I mean, he wasn't far off from Alvin Kamara. You got to think about it. Alvin Kamara did not have 6 touchdowns in the championship game, which I'm grateful for because I won my championship. But I do think that you've seen Dalvin Cook end as an RB1. So I think that he's not far off. I just hope that he's able to get a little more catches. If he played 2 more games, I'm sure he would have had been close to Alvin Kamara. But I just think Dalvin Cook for me is the top guy for now. So that's all the players for my top 12 for 2021, my early rankings. Now, this stuff could change based on injuries that happened during the offseason or during training camp and all that. But as of right now, I got Joe Mixon at 12, Cam Akers at 11, Aaron Jones at 10, Nick Chubb at 9, Ezekiel Elliot at 8, Jonathan Taylor at 7, Derrick Henry at 6, Austin Ekeler at 5, Alvin Kamara at 4, Saquon Barkley at 3, Christian McCaffrey at 2, and then Dalvin Cook at 1. So let me know what y'all think. Like I said, these are my early ranks, so things can change. Do you see why I ranked the players where I did? The justification for it. If you don't, what would you argue? What would some of the things that you would change? Who's in your top 12? I'd love to hear from you guys, so leave a comment below. But honestly, don't forget to send any of your questions to my email at chip@gridironfantasyfootball.com. I'd love to be able to read what you guys send and kind of get some ideas on episodes that you might want to have throughout the offseason, because right now I'm doing my rankings. I'll do wide receivers, then tight ends next. But I definitely want to see what you guys are looking for when it comes to podcast and on the YouTube. So just hit me up on my email, let me know, or leave comments below. But that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. Like I said, please comment, share, and like these videos and the podcast with your friends and family. And on the next episode, I'll be talking about my early top 12 rankings for the wide receiver position. So please hit subscribe so you don't miss any more episodes. And if you want to follow us on social media, you can find us on Facebook and Twitter at The Gridiron Pod, and on Instagram at Gridiron Fantasy Football. So that's it for today. Have a great day, and we'll see you all on the next episode. Take care.